Okay, this is the third lecture of chapter 9, and it relates to questionnaires. Much of learning about questionnaires is really about doing, so we're just going to highlight a few important aspects. It is fairly straightforward in terms of looking at the format, but there obviously are a few tricky issues, and we're going to really try and consider them in this lecture, as well as just basically go through broadly what you need to do. So questionnaires, their purpose is obviously to collect qualitative and quantitative data to try and achieve a research project's objectives. I often hear students talk when they talk about research and say, oh, it would be really interesting to find out this, but really that's not the issue. We don't do research or marketing research just because it's interesting. We do it because there are specific outcomes that we want to achieve. So it's important to bear that in mind. And with that in mind, we have to have a structured approach to the drafting of a questionnaire. There are basic guidelines. I've put them all out there as a way of introduction. And we'll deal with each of these briefly throughout the course of the lecture. So the first one is to specify the type of information that is needed, and precisely what needs to be measured to solve the marketing problem. For example, it could be Likert type scale questionnaires, it could be more in-depth, it could be mixed methodology. You might want to get qualitative information. So those are the sorts of decisions that you need to make up front. That will really assist you in determining the type of questionnaire and how you're going to administer it. For example, it might be totally inappropriate to try and collect qualitative data via the internet. People may just not want to respond. They may want some sort of personal interview to disclose personal information, or vice versa. They may be reluctant to talk to somebody about personal information, but they may prefer to do it if they can do it anonymously. I've discussed the issue of sending questionnaires through mail, and I have to question whether it's really relevant in today's day and age. But nevertheless, those depends on who you're sending the questionnaire to. Perhaps if you're sending it to the elderly, they might appreciate it coming through the mail, given that the fact that they are used to corresponding through pen and paper. So it all depends on the nature of the questions and also the sample that you are trying to focus on. Step 3 is to determine the question content. Now, I've discussed the issue of that using colloquial language that people might not understand. So it's important that you phrase your questionnaire in language that people understand, or that your sample understands. So it isn't necessarily what is good English or whatever language you're going to use for your questionnaire. It's really that people will understand it. So step 4 is deciding on the question response format. We've discussed all the different types of questions which you can use, so I'm not going to repeat that. You can have structured questions or perhaps unstructured questions. Once again, it really talks to the research question that you're trying to answer. That will determine the nature of the questions that you put in your questionnaire. You also need to decide on the individual question phrasing, and I've mentioned that a little bit earlier on. But one of the biggest issues relates to what they call double-barreled questions, where you're asking more than one concept in a question, and you need to be very careful about that. And it's just if you think about it and try and relate it to what you're trying to achieve, just make sure that you're only asking one question. Okay, an example of that would be if you had use a Likert type scale with making a statement to which you would obviously strongly disagree or strongly agree and everything in between. Something like business management and economics are my favorite subjects. It's very difficult to interpret that question or that statement. Is it business management or is it economics? Which one is it? So that's it. You also need to decide on the question sequence. I had a student some years ago who was doing research on culture and cultural advertisements, and one of his questions related to what people thought of other cultures, and it was potentially controversial. So he put that at the end of the questionnaire just to make sure that people at least answered most of the questionnaire, and hopefully when they saw that these possibly controversial questions were right at the end, that they would just fill them in rather than just get disillusioned right at the beginning of the questionnaire. So that can be an important element as well. The physical characteristics and layout of the questionnaire, that's critical. You know, it really needs to make sense. It needs to be neat, it needs to be tidy, and that's something which particularly students often don't realize, that's an important element of marketing your questionnaire, because if people don't understand it and it looks untidy, people will be less inclined to complete the questionnaires. And step 8 suggests that you should re-examine steps 1 to 7, and I can't emphasize that enough. Unfortunately, a lot of people think that, you know, once you do something, you do it once and it's done, and it's not. Things have to go. You have to go over things again and again and again to make sure that they are accurate and up to scratch, because you are going to miss things the first few times that you go around or go through a questionnaire. And then pre-testing the questionnaire is critical. I recall some market research that we did. We filled in or drafted a questionnaire, and one of the terms we used was a company. You know, does your company, for example, use internet marketing? And we took it out to the sample, and one guy looked at it and said, but we're not a company, we're a small business. And that sort of thing, one can easily make a mistake, and it can confuse the sample. So one needs to make sure with pre-testing that you've got the terminology. Okay, well, that's chapter 9. Thank you for attending this lecture. I'll look forward to chatting to you on chapter 10. Thank you.